Next, we look at the statistical approach to classification of personality, very much spearheaded by Raymond Bernard Cattell. Cattell distinguished among three methods in the study of personality: clinical, bivariate, and multivariate. Cattell believes that the most important technique in multivariate research is the factor analysis. Factor analysis is a statistical method that finds relationships among many different items and allow them to be grouped together in a meaningful way. Cattell initially used factor analysis and found out 15 factors that appear to account for most of the personality traits. And thousands of questionnaires were written and administered to a large number of normal people, and a subsequent factor analysis were run to see how these items would go together. And the main outcome of this research is the questionnaire known as the 16 personality factor, 16 PF questionnaire, and is still being used now. Now, more specifically, Cattell used factor analysis method to reanalyze the Albert list of 4,500 adjectives for describing people, and organized the list into 181 clusters and asked subjects to rate people whom they knew by the adjectives on the list. And he generated 12 factors initially, later added another 4 factors which he believed ought to appear in this list. And Cattell believed that people would describe themselves and each other according to these 16 different and independent variables. The factor analysis. Now, what is the factor analysis application? Just give you an example. You would reduce large variables to smaller factors for data modeling, and to validate a scale or index by demonstrating its constituent items load on the same factor. To select a subset of variables from a larger subset based on which original variables have the highest correlations with some other factors. And finally, to create a subset of factors to be treated as an uncorrelated variables as one approach to handling multi-collinearity in such procedures as multi-regression. It's so hard to describe. And just to give you an example, what are the 16 PF? This is the 16 PF. Okay? And you can see it's bipolar on one end is the first reserve and outgoing. That's intelligent, more intelligent. So this is the 16 factors. And the 16 PF test provides scores on 16 primary personality scales and the 5 global personality scales, all of which are bipolar. You would have seen this bipolar, meaning that both ends of each scale has a distinct, meaningful definition. And taken together, the multivariate analysis is based on the statistical principle of multivariate statistics, which involves observation and analysis of more than one statistical outcome variable at a time. And to give you an example, this is like how multivariate analysis is done to validation of a particular questionnaire. Okay, and here is another example of how different factors would load on a particular factor. It could be extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and open-mindedness, and how these factors load together. If you study statistics, you would understand this immediately. If you don't care. All right, this is enough for you to know. So we can appreciate Catel's wisdom in classifying personality traits. Used to be just go by words, and which is the super trait, which is secondary trait, or which is the descriptors. There was no solid logic until Cattell used factor analysis, load the similar factors together and gave them an overall name that's called superfactor or super trait. And this is using statistical or mathematical methods to substantiate the classification of personality. That's very important. A big jump forward for understanding and classifying personality. In addition, Cattell also distinguished three sorts of data, including the life record data, L data, questionnaire data, Q data, and objective test data, OT data. The life record data examines one's behaviors in actual everyday situations, such as school, performance, or interaction with peers. The questionnaire data examines one's behaviors by self-report data or responses to different questionnaires. The objective test data examines one's behavior in situations whereby the subject is unaware of the relationship between the responses and the personality characteristic or trait being measured. So this is like a figure of how the three kinds of data are presented separately. The most important thing is there has to be cross-validation of this test results or the data. The Q data, questionnaire data, L data, live record data, and objective test data, OT data, and it could be self-evaluation. How do you review yourself? What we call SE data. If you put all this data together, you're going to have a more thorough, in-depth description and classification and prediction of a person's personality. And in my class at City University of Hong Kong, I used to teach my students to do cross-validation studies of the full set of data. And it's very interesting how each part could be correlated with each other, and that will give you a more solid subjective description and classification of personality than previously advocated lexical classification, which is just very much subjective classification of personality traits. So finally, we'll look at Cattell's credits in study of personality, for setting out to define structure of personality in three areas of observation, L data, Q data, and OT data, and for studying his research with L data, and for using factor analysis of rating to come up with 16 source traits or super traits, and for developing the 16 PF or 16 personality factor questionnaire itself. So that's for Cattell.